Welcome to the Wild North Hockey Podcast. This is Noah Hakela along with
Gunnar Green, and it's good to be here. Today is March 24th, 2022, and today we are going to be having a great episode. We've got tons to talk about. The trade deadline was just last Monday. It was the busiest trade deadline in NHL history with 32 trades. It was initially 33 until the league, and this was just announced this morning, I believe. They had just voided the Evgeny Dadonov trade to Anaheim because Vegas did not do their due diligence and didn't realize that Evgeny Dadonov had a modified no-trade clause, and including the team being Anaheim, who he was initially dealt to. So the league just voided that, and it's kind of hilarious to think about how a front office, especially in a major sports league, can overlook something like that. And so Vegas is in shambles. They no longer have the ability to activate Mark Stone or Alec Martinez off of long-term injured reserve, and they
need to make a playoff push right now where they sit 1 point behind Dallas in the wild card race, but they're also 4 games more than Dallas, which not having Mark Stone or Martinez really just bluffs them down
Absolutely,
the list.
And with Robin Lehner still hurt, they don't really have a lot in goalie, with Logan Thompson playing as their starting goalie, as we saw on Monday night as well. And we'll kind of talk a bit more about Monday night, but first let's kind of get into the trade deadline moves. So the first move we made, which is a few days before the deadline, was the Tyson Jost and the Nico Sturm deal.
I really like that trade a lot, really just because Sturm is like a bottom pairing guy, and I feel like Avalanche really needed that bottom 6 forward kind of physicality on their team. And Tyson Jost can honestly probably make his way up the roster come next season. Right now, we're just kind of set in stone.
Yep.
And he's just kind of getting used to the team, but
solid pickup. And we did offer Nico Sturm a long-term extension, but we couldn't get anything to come to terms with that. So not only do we not lose him for nothing, but we also get a little cap certainty into next season, where the $15 million dead cap is going to start hitting in, and that's going to be a lot to deal with for Bill Guerin, but he's got a plan. He knows what he wants to do. What that plan is, none of us know, but we will see, and there's a lot of different factors, and we'll discuss that later on in this episode here. But the thing I like about Tyson Jost is he plays with a lot of energy, a lot of
he's a real
hustle.
high energy guy. He's always defense and offense. He's like the true two-way forward that's good for this team come playoffs.
Yep.
And what I like about this trade is that, in my opinion, Tyson Jost has a lot more trade value than Nico Sturm did. And getting that 1-for-1 could really just benefit a trade this offseason, too.
No, absolutely. And another move we made was the acquiring of Nicolas Deslauriers from the Anaheim Ducks. And initially, so when this trade first came about, I didn't mind getting a physical presence like Deslauriers. Coming in, he was 5th in the league and hits at 210. Big, 6'2", I believe, 6'3",
6'1", 220.
Yep, 220. I mean, absolute just unit, absolute specimen. And initially, I had a little concern with giving up a 3rd round pick, but at the same time, come trade deadline, and you tend to overpay a little bit.
And sometimes at the trade deadline, it's kind of the time where you dump a draft pick,
absolutely,
knowing that you need to make this run.
Well,
and especially being next year's 3rd round pick. And after watching that Vegas game of what he can do for this team, I think this team's a whole new team
now.
now.
Absolutely. And especially when we have as good of a prospect pool as we do, we can kind of afford to give up some of those mid-round picks as well.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, with Monday's game, Deslauriers obviously shined. If you haven't fallen in love with him yet, you will very, very soon. He definitely made a statement scoring a goal, which don't expect him to put a lot of numbers up, but he's definitely going to run a few people through the boards. And you saw that in his first shift even. He had a couple just massive hits.
And what I like about him, too, is that he made the quote saying he wants to keep Foligno on the ice and I'll do the dirty work, which, honestly, watching our games and when Foligno goes in the box and you don't have that grief line out there, it's just not the same team.
Especially when you, like, for 5 to 7 minutes, you're not able to have that line combination out there, because I believe that the grief line is easily our best line.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
on 2 ways of the ice,
yep,
for sure.
They forecheck the hardest. Teams have just a fit when it comes to trying to break the puck out of the zone, and even then they just wear you down.
They just play like really physical along the wall and really like to cycle the puck and play board play.
Absolutely.
And that will tire a defense out, trying to play against physical big body guys and getting constantly hit and run into the wall. It's not fun to play.
And that's just perfect playoff hockey right there, especially if the Wild are wanting to make a solid run this year, getting out of the first round.
Especially having Delorier and Duhaime as that fourth line together just really brings that grittiness to the Wild. And, like, especially playoff time, that's what you need the most. And our bottom two lines definitely do good on that.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest move of this trade deadline was obviously the trade of Victor Rask, obviously. But,
Future considerations has been around the league a few times now. But
Yep. Well, the funny thing with future considerations is about 90% of the time that usually just means nothing. So we did retain 50% of his cap space, or 50% of his $4 million cap hit. So we do save $2 million when it comes to saving the cap space. But now let's get to the biggest move, which is obviously the acquiring a future Hall of Fame goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury, and that was just honestly a masterpiece of a deal. And coming up to the deadline, there was some rumblings that Minnesota was in the mix, that he'd want to waive his no movement clause. But there's a few times where it sounded like they had a deal set, and then there's a few times where it seemed dead because Chicago didn't want to back down from their asking price of a first-round pick, and we didn't want to outright give up a first-round pick.
And see, I really like how Billy G kind of just took that in the reins and was like, here's the thing. We'll give you our second-round pick, but if we don't make it far in the playoffs, have the second-round pick. If we do, we'll give you a first. So it's kind of like a win-win for both teams because Blackhawks aren't making the playoffs. That's noticeable.
Absolutely not.
They wanted a first-round pick out of it, but we didn't want to budge. So it's kind of like the perfect middle ground of like what we are really desiring for that.
No, absolutely. And so the conditions of this first-round pick is if the Wild make it to the conference final, the third round, and if Marc-Andre Fleury accounts for 4 of those wins, it will turn into a first. And by that point, you make the conference final, your pick's either going to be anywhere from 28 to 32.
And you don't need those.
You don't need that, especially because, I mean, you can maybe find some gems in those later rounds. I mean, look at Joel Eriksson, he was a 20th overall pick, but we're not looking.
Hartman was a 30th overall pick.
Yep. And so it's really great to see a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury because he just brings this aura around him. I mean, third all-time in wins.
It's like the player you bring on the team, not even just because he's obviously a star player, but he brings like that presence that he wants to get it done. He wants this team to do well. And it's not like he just didn't want to come to Minnesota. He purposely wanted to be here. He waived his no movement clause just to come here. And I think bringing that veteran goaltender instead of having Kaapo Kähkönen, which I loved Kaapo Kähkönen in all ways, but it's better to have veteran presence in a playoff situation.
No, absolutely.
And Cam Talbot and Fleury both have that leadership.
And, I mean, goaltending was definitely something that I know going in a few weeks back, we were thinking there probably wasn't going to be much moves, but with the way the goaltending was kind of playing, Bill Guerin felt like we needed to make a change. And these past few games, Talbot's been playing very well.
Yep.
We got to give him his credit for that. He had a shutout on Monday. And I know Bill Guerin had been talking with Cam Talbot prior to making a move for Fleury, discussing with them, and he even said it's just amazing how much of a professional that Cam Talbot was. And I think that just speaks volumes for how great this locker room is, what this team culture is like. These guys want to win. They want to compete. And we haven't seen that out of a Minnesota Wild team in probably forever, honestly.
Right. And, like, I look at this, too, and Talbot was the backup for Lundqvist, and I feel like Talbot knows what it's like to be behind someone that's so great. Like, Hall of Fame status. He knows, like, his role on the team, and he knows he's an important piece on the team. It's not like we're just dipping him right to the curb or anything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be a lot of A-B goaltending, a lot of switching it up until playoff time.
And even then, Fleury is used to that too. I mean, back in Pittsburgh, it was between him and Matt Murray, and the reason why he had to leave Pittsburgh was because of the expansion draft. He'd only protect one goalie.
Yep.
So obviously, Vegas picked him up, and then when he was in Vegas, between him and Robin Lehner. Now, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but Vegas just seemed to not really like Marc-Andre Fleury as much, even though he was their franchise player. He was the first big-time player in franchise history.
Yep.
And granted, him and Lehner took it in stride. They were both professionals about it. They got along just fine. They made the best out of that situation. But then Vegas trading Fleury to Chicago for pretty much scraps. I don't even remember who they got, but they waived him. They bought him out within the next 2 days. So they essentially just got nothing out of Fleury, which is just absolutely insane to think about, especially when you're a reigning Vezina Trophy winner.
And 3-time Stanley Cup champion. It kind of makes you feel like less of a person if you're giving up that cheap of a deal, and especially because Fleury's that great of a goalie, and he's a great person too. I just kind of betraying him in a way.
Yep, and so obviously with the acquiring of Marc-Andre Fleury, obviously one goalie had to go, and that goalie was Kaapo Kähkönen, so we sent him to the Sharks along with a 5th-round pick for...
we got a bruiser defenseman, which we really needed.
Jacob Middleton, and you watch this guy play, he is your typical old-school big-body defenseman. He's going to do the gritty work. He's played along Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns all season. Everybody who watched him play in San Jose has nothing but high praise for him. And he just brings a well-needed physical presence on that back end, because I went to the game where we retired Mikko Koivu's number against Nashville, and the ceremony was great, but the game was just absolutely awful to watch. We were getting bullied by Nashville. Obviously, we have more skill than Nashville does, but they just beat us physically all the game long, and that really showed. And I think that's what really got Bill Guerin thinking we need to really up this physical presence, which goes in hand with acquiring Middleton, acquiring Delurier, and really just rejuvenating.
We never really had that big body defenseman since maybe like a Carson Soucy, which we sadly had to give up in the expansion draft. But this season, like you said, we've lacked the physical presence on the back end. Like, we got big bodies in Merrill and Kulikov, but they just don't play like a big bruiser kind of guy.
Exactly.
And Middleton brings that exact energy, and he's a good locker room guy, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
And even, like, him and Delorier would get into it, Anaheim versus Sharks games, and Delorier was the first one to call Middleton and go out to have dinner with him.
Yep.
Just shows, like, this locker room atmosphere is just off the charts.
And so with the acquiring of Middleton, we also now have a little bit of a rotating door on the defensive end. And so with the game tonight, Dmitry Kulikov against Vancouver, Dmitry Kulikov will be sitting the odd man out tonight with Middleton being in the lineup. But honestly, now we have the ability to kind of set up certain matchups, set up certain lineups against specific teams. So one game it could be Kulikov sitting out, next could be Goligoski, next could be Merrill. We have that ability now. We have that depth now, and that's huge when you're going into a playoffs.
The 3 untouchables on the lineup are Spurgeon, Brodin, and Dumba, and the other 3 are all expendable.
Yep, absolutely. And so now that the trade deadline has moved past, now we can kind of look into college hockey. So college hockey, a lot of the conference tournaments came about this last week or so, and so the NCHC Bulldogs went on a run. Ryan Fanti was an absolute, I don't know how to explain it. He was incredible. Those last 2 games, having a shutout against Denver and Western Michigan. And Denver and Western Michigan are very good teams.
Yep.
They pulled off a very solid win against a solid St. Cloud State team. And the NCHC really is above and beyond the best college hockey division in the nation.
I wish they still had the original WCHA.
Oh, yeah. That was
all the Battle of Minnesota and all that stuff, and now they just moved the Gophers to Big 12.
Or Big 10.
Big 10.
Yeah, and so the Big 10 championship was between the Gophers and a very stacked Michigan team. Michigan was able to pull off the win, and really, I mean, the Gophers didn't show up until the last 5 minutes.
And, I mean, you can't really blame like Minnesota, because Michigan literally has all first-round picks for their starting lineup.
In the 2021 draft, 4 out of the top 5 picks were either going to play for Michigan or had already played in Michigan. And Owen Power, Matty Beniers, Kent Johnson, and Luke Hughes. And so it was a very solid team. And Michigan, I think, is probably the favorite to win the whole NCAA tournament.
Oh, yeah.
And we move over to the CCHA, the first year of existence, and that was one hell of a game. It really was. Between Mankato and Bemidji State. Bemidji State ran the table, make it to the championship. It was a very tight game against a Mankato team that's just been dominant the past 2 months.
Olympic player on their team, too.
And obviously, and if you haven't known, and this is really interesting, I've never seen something like this, where Mankato looks like they've scored a goal in overtime to win the game, but upon further review, and this is after they did the whole post-game ceremony, gave the trophy out and whatnot, fans had already left the building, the refs had even left the building, but the puck was seen to have gone under the net and had not gone in through the net. It went under the side of the net and in. So they had to bring everybody back and then start the game back and start the overtime period up again. And Mankato still ended up winning that game, but it was just, you never see something like this.
Like, you'd think that they would review the clip before even, like, announcing everything is over. Like,
Yep.
That just sounds something that could have been not mistaken, but foreseen and not happen, because wow. Imagine like thinking you won and then you're like, no, actually get back on the ice.
Exactly. It's definitely one hell of a situation there. But so the NCAA tournament just started today, and before we started recording, Mankato played against Harvard, and in a game where they dominated the first half of the game, they were up 3-rip. Harvard makes a little bit of a push to make it 3-2. Mankato then gives them the dagger. Harvard scores one more late in the third to kind of make it a game, but Mankato pulls through.
4-3.
4-3. They move on. And then just about an hour ago, University of Minnesota Duluth takes on Michigan Tech. They win that game very handily. Ryan Fanti with yet another shutout. And honestly, it's hard to argue. He's been the best goalie in college hockey the past couple months. Easily.
For sure.
Easily. And so Duluth is definitely a sleeper pick when it comes to the tournament. I don't know if they have what it takes to beat Michigan, because they played Michigan early on in the year and Michigan just stomped on them. And, I mean, Michigan's just a really deep, talented team.
I think it just all comes down to who shows up, though.
Absolutely. And
because they put on their skates the same way. The good old cliche quote, they put on their jockstrap the same way. But whoever shows up, shows up. It's not like it's a best-of-7 series. It's one and done.
You never want to count out a Scott Sandelin playoff team, tournament team. They know how to play, and when it comes tournament time, they won back-to-back titles, not by chance. They played for those titles.
Yep.
But with the trade deadline passing by and the college hockey season quickly coming up to a close here, we start moving into college free agents. And in the past, the Wild have definitely made some moves in the college free agent market. Example is Mike Riley. Nico Sturm from Clarkson. But I know for a fact one guy that the Wild are looking into is Hobie Baker finalist and Golden Gopher Ben Myers, who's had a very solid year, easily been the best player on this Gopher team this season.
And we could really use the center depth in our prospect pool. Especially.
Absolutely. And obviously we had to deal Jack McBain because he wasn't going to sign with us.
Now we have potentially 2 second-round picks if Philip Johansson, our 2018 first-round pick, doesn't sign, which it's speculated.
I don't think we're going to sign him. That was not a good first-round pick.
That's a Paul Fenton pick.
It was. But I think what it all comes down to with Ben Myers is if we can sell him on an elevated role in this organization, we'll be able to get him. And so if we sign him, the contract probably would not hit until this next year, and then he'd probably play on an amateur tryout in Iowa, which is totally okay. I mean, you don't want to just throw a college guy right into the NHL right away. At least give him some AHL time and have him play that out. I mean, Matt Boldy didn't come up straight to the NHL. He went from Boston College to Iowa and played really well.
The AHL is that much worse than the NHL. These are all NHL caliber guys. They don't call it the Always Hungry League for a reason.
Exactly.
Because they want to get that bigger paycheck. These guys can all play in the NHL. It just depends on who can really break
who gets the chance, who gets the call, who makes the most of their opportunity. And really, I mean, if you, sure, the NHL is easily, the best league in the world. You'll see the most talent in the world. But if you want to see guys who really want to go and play for a spot, play with heart, you got to go to the AHL. They
give it their all
they do.
Every single game.
They really do. And I give props for that big time.
I've been to an AHL game, and they're honestly really entertaining.
Yep.
Just because it's not just a slow-paced hockey. It is go hard and hit and grind for the puck. There is a battle every single game.
Absolutely. And so, kind of moving on now, we'll talk about Monday's game against Vegas. And this is a different Wild team. That first period was easily the best period of hockey I have seen this team play all season long. Sure, they only scored 1 goal, but it really felt like this is our new identity. This is what Wild hockey really is.
And with Delorier on the ice, it just made our team look like a whole new team. And, we're physical, we're fast, we're moving the puck, we're always just supporting each other.
Everybody grew about 6 inches once Delorier got on the team. And
we don't have just Foligno fighting anymore. We
Absolutely.
have Delorier, we have Middleton, we have Duhaime too. It's not like our physical presence isn't there. It is very
Hartman's
visible.
willing to scrap every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that second period, it wasn't as good. We definitely did get dominated that first 10 minutes.
Yep.
But Talbot held strong. Talbot had a really solid game that game, so you got to give props to Talbot. I believe Talbot was the player of the game that game, second, or with Delorier being
First.
behind him. Yep. But, it was just honestly a very solid game. And if we play like that throughout the rest of the year and into the playoffs, I have a hard time seeing any team who can beat us, at least in the West.
And all these teams during the regular season might look really good as a skilled team, but playoff hockey is playoff hockey.
Absolutely.
A Montreal Canadiens team makes it all the way to the Stanley Cup final just because they played a certain style of hockey, and that was the defensive, physical, and maybe a little bit of offense, but they played their game true to their tone.
And they really did give it their all, and obviously they're feeling the effects of it this year, but that can be the downside of going all in. Obviously, we're seeing it from Vegas. The first 5 years of existence, they've done nothing but try to compete. They made it to the Stanley Cup final their first year, obviously losing in 5 to the Caps. But now we're starting to kind of see the effects of them going all in, now that they're not even able to activate Mark Stone or Alec Martinez off of long-term injury reserve, and players are getting hurt. When you consistently make the playoffs, you don't get as long as an offseason as, say, other teams that aren't making the playoffs as much, so you're not going to be as well rested.
Yep.
And that's why it's hard to see teams win back-to-back. So, obviously, Tampa's won back-to-back, but Pittsburgh's won back-to-back, but you eventually start to feel the effects. Players start to get hurt a little bit more, and it's hard to keep certain cores together, too.
And teams are different every single year.
Yep.
You don't have the same lineups. You could be facing a Colorado Avalanche team with McKinnon and all these guys in the next season. You could have just bruisers on the back end.
No, absolutely. And so coming into this game against Vancouver's a team that they're on the outside looking in. They've definitely been on a bigger upturn since Bruce Boudreau took over as head coach after they fired Travis Green.
Yep.
And so they come in, Bruce Boudreau's first game back in Minnesota after getting fired a couple years ago, which he did a good job in the regular season with us, but
he was never able to make it past the second round.
I don't even know if we made it past the first round with him.
We never made it past the first round with him, but him as a head coach usually could never make it past the second round.
And he had a year or two where he made it to the conference final with Anaheim, but they'd end up running into Chicago when they were a powerhouse.
Yep.
But this is definitely going to be a statement game. So Talbot's going to be in net tonight, with the Wild giving Marc-Andre Fleury an extra day or two to get his family situated, because his family's still in Chicago. I think they're going to remain in Chicago for this time period, which honestly is not that far. It's a 50-minute flight or a 5-hour drive at most. You get an off day, go see him for a day.
And he has the money to take a private jet.
Absolutely.
If it really comes down to it.
And the big thing, and I completely forgot about this with the Marc-Andre Fleury trade, is that Chicago retained 50% of his $7 million cap hit. So we're only paying him $3.5 million, which is huge.
Yep.
Especially with cap hit. But kind of going into playoffs, and this is more reckless speculation here, but going into the offseason, it's going to be a very wild and busy offseason. I had the privilege to go to a live airing of the Worst Seats in the House podcast from Michael Russo, athletic writer, and play-by-play commentator Anthony LaPanta. And I got to ask them a question on the pod. Basically, what is this offseason going to look like for the Wild? What's Bill Guerin thinking going in, and who he thinks is going to get moved? And There was no guarantees. It's really hard to speculate from when you're on the outside looking in.
Yep.
But it all comes down to this. Depending on how these new guys, Delurier, Middleton, Fleury play, and if we want to keep them, if they want to stay, we can find a way to keep them. But then we got to make some other moves. Someone's going to leave, whether it's a Dumba or a Fiala.
Mm-hmm.
Goligoski, I can guarantee you, is probably not going to get re-signed.
He's just, the age is catching up to him.
Absolutely.
And personally, I love how Fiala's playing right now.
Mm-hmm.
I would trade Dumba over Fiala right now, as is, but if people come free agency try and offer sheet Fiala more than we want to give, the upside about that is that we get 4 first-round picks.
And
3 or 4 first-round picks.
And that's if they try to offer him a higher average annual value of $8 million. Now, last year he was asking for $6 million.
Yep.
And I feel like he'll probably want the $6 or $7 million figure, which obviously is going to be tough for us to do. And so you look at Marc-Andre Fleury, he'll be a free agent after this year, but he's not going to want to move to another team.
Mm-mm.
I know he wants to play another year, and what really helps the case for us is that him and Bill Guerin are tight. They won a cup together playing in 2009, and then Bill Guerin was obviously the assistant general manager of those Penguins teams that won back-to-back in 16 and 17.
Yep.
So they have a tight relationship there, along with Ray Shero, who was a former general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins during that 09 run. I think Jim Rutherford was the GM of the 16-17 years, but still, they're very tight.
Yep.
And Ray Shero is a special advisor to Bill Guerin on the front office. So he's already got those connections there. He'll be able to move his family over. If we can have him for one more year, that would be big. Especially because we can get Wallstedt over playing in Iowa
next year.
Then have him get seasoning.
And even then, we could have him come up and practice with the Wild, and having Fleury as your mentor is probably one of the biggest things you could have for a goalie.
Absolutely.
Just because Wallstedt has the playing ability to be a good goalie, but if he gets that mentality and mindset from Fleury, that's a huge game.
And at the same time, especially with Wallstedt, I'd argue is easily our biggest prospect in our system when it comes. I mean, you could say this about Rossi and Beckman. They're going to be up next year. They're going to want roster spots. They will get roster spots next year. So that's another thing to consider when it comes to these offseason moves.
Yep.
But Fleury comes back, Talbot's probably going to get dealt. And that's fine. We can definitely get a decent return out of him. But that also helps the salary cap a little bit. I think his cap hit's a little over $3.5 million.
I think it's 3.7 or something.
Something like that, yeah. And obviously, I hate to see Talbot go because he's definitely been a big part of this locker room as well.
Yep.
But he truly feels like he can be a number one goalie. And I don't fault him for that because he does have stretches where this guy is borderline unstoppable. And then, obviously this year there's been some inconsistencies. He had a stretch where, save percentage was 86%. Everything seemed to go in. At the same time, defense wasn't helping him as much either.
Which I think with all getting Middleton will definitely help out our defense. Just because we don't have that strength to move guys out front.
Mm-hmm.
Spurgeon's 5'9", Goligoski's 5'10".
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Dumba and Brodin are probably the bigger.
They're bigger guys,
they're strong enough to
they don't have the ability to move guys out of the front. And I saw that firsthand on that Predators game because there's multiple times where it was either Brodin or Dumba up front. They couldn't move guys. They couldn't even move Philip Forsberg out of the way of the net.
Philip Forsberg's a big man.
He's a big man. He's got great skill, but you should be able to move out forwards. And obviously, it's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
But even just having the effort to get him out of there, I didn't even really see that. I saw him Brodin trying to maybe box out a little bit, kind of in basketball where you're trying to get a rebound, but that wasn't really working. It's still getting in the way of Kakinen's line of vision, and shots are still going in.
Yep. And Kulikov and Merrill can do their work in front of the net, but adding Middleton is just, we needed that kind of guy, the kind of guy that is out there and you're kind of intimidated to play against. You see that mustache and you just kind of wet your pants.
That mustache is the last thing you see before you end up in the corner thinking, oh my God, what happened? You're grabbing your head.
Gosh.
But yeah.
I really would love to see a Merrill-Middleton pairing just for the mustache.
Oh yeah, that would be the dirtiest looking D pairing in the NHL, and I don't think you can argue with that. I mean that's something you see out of like Slapshot. That is something you see out of Slapshot right there. You look at that and you're thinking, oh man, these guys are scrapping with the Hansons immediately.
See, I think we're gonna have one of the best playoff beards in the league.
I believe so too. This team's got a great culture. They have a lot of fun, and now that we have this, and hopefully we can string together some wins. We're in the middle of a 9-game homestand, the biggest in franchise history, and we've definitely taken advantage of it. With the only loss being that Nashville game, which was at the very start.
Which since then we have completely tried to change our game.
Absolutely.
Everything. I mean, what game was it? The Blackhawks game?
Blackhawks game.
Immediately after that game was over, we just got the Laurier.
Yep.
Which was probably the greatest acquisition we could have got for this playoff run.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I love when you have those players on your team that accept their role. They're not there to get points or goals. They're just there to hit, play body, play whatever the coach wants them to, and that's the Laurier.
And that's really what it comes down to, is just knowing your role.
Yep.
If you know your role, you play your role the best of your ability, you will succeed. Everybody buys into the system. If you you can have a team like, let's just say Colorado. Granted, they play well together, but let's say everybody wants to get their numbers. McKinnon wants to get his numbers. Rantanen, Landeskog, they want to get the numbers. Kadri, they want to get the numbers, but they're not really buying in. Everybody is kind of in it for themselves. Not saying that they are right now, but I'm more using that as an example. You get teams like that. Sure, they have a lot of high-scoring players, but if they don't know how to play well with each other, if nobody knows how to play their own role, then you're going to fall quickly.
And that's the thing about the Wild is I think every single player knows what their job is. Obviously, Kirill, Zook, and Hartman are going to go out there and try and get the points up.
Mm-hmm.
Boldy, Fiala, and Goudreau the same. But then you get to that grief line, and they know we get the puck deep. We play body. We pin the puck. We play the puck down low, and if it gets to the front, it gets to the front. Even the fourth line plays that too.
Yep.
Like Tyson Jost might be a more skilled player, but he still plays that two-way game. He'll go in the corners. He'll move the puck.
Yep.
Duhaime and Delorier will do their physical presence.
Yep. And I strongly believe the grief line is probably the greatest forecheck in the league. I mean, they suffocate teams in their own zone. And I think that's really what we were missing in these when we were going through our slump, is that our forecheck was just not the same. And
we were just kind of slow, not really getting to the pucks. We weren't really making an issue for
we
the
weren't
defense.
winning puck battles. We weren't winning races to the puck. I mean, we were getting beat on hustle plays. I mean, teams were just out hustling us.
Yep.
And another thing that was killer for us was turnovers. And one thing I've noticed is that as great as Zuccarello and Kaprizov have been this year, these past few games, I've really noticed an upturn in Zuccarello's turnovers. He'll do a no-look pass, a fancy pass to the middle of the ice. It'll get intercepted, and the puck's going the other way, and we lose the momentum from that. We've seen them make these plays before.
Yep.
But I really believe that they just need to kind of get back to basics, and maybe not so much like the basics, but simplify their game a bit.
See, watching Kaprizov play, was it against Chicago where he cut behind the D and got the pass from Zuccarello in his
It was
own
Boston.
game?
It was Boston.
The Boston game. I loved how Kirill came out fast. Kirill was playing like the KHL Kirill, where he just didn't care, went as fast as he could and drove the net. And I like that when Kirill plays like that.
Absolutely.
I don't like when he plays the
laid back, kind of just moving the puck.
The
I want
calculated
him to be
playmaker.
shooting. I want him to be driving the net. I want him to just do what Kirill does.
And even if he's driving the net and just being aggressive, you can still find passing lanes, because if you're aggressive enough, teams are going to pay attention to you. You're not going to be able to go through 3 or 4 guys yourself.
Right.
And when you have a couple guys on you, somebody's going to be open. Key thing is, and he's really good at finding the open man and controlling the puck. I mean, it is so hard to knock him off the puck. I mean, just watching him control the puck it's almost like an art, really.
It's all about his mohawk, his hip control, and putting his back to the play. Because when you try and push someone over that as their back to you, they just use the forward momentum to go forward and catch themselves and skate out of it.
Yeah.
You push someone from the front, they fall backwards.
Yeah.
And his mohawking skills are unreal. It looks like Sidney Crosby.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the puck control is definitely comparable to Sidney Crosby. I mean, I strongly believe Crosby is the greatest player when it comes to just playing along the boards and controlling the puck. And, I mean, he's still a fantastic player at age
Jason
35.
Spezza clip where he just made Jason Spezza chase him around the ice.
Yep, pretty much. And, I mean, and Crosby doesn't get talked enough anymore. Just strictly, and I think more it's just because we've been spoiled by the McDavids and the Matthews.
And the Draisaitls.
But Crosby's still a great player in his own right.
He's always been the perfect two-way center.
Yep. And easily was the greatest player of our generation. I mean, sure, you can make an argument for Ovechkin, but, I mean, he's definitely a little bit more one-dimensional. He'll put the puck in the net. You're not going to really get much out of him after that. He plays physical sometimes. You'll eventually, every now and then see the big hit from him. But a lot of time, he's waiting for that pass, or he's driving the net and getting shots on goal, putting the puck in the net. Whereas
Crosby's just the perfect hockey player, the one that you want your franchise to idolize.
Oh, absolutely.
And be on your team, as long as he has been with Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, and when I was younger, I used to hate Crosby, and I think a lot of us did. But I mean, as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate his play and his skill set because I mean. Let's think about it like this: the Crosbys, the Ovechkins, they're not going to be around much longer. Ovechkin's 36, 37.
The Hugheses, the
Jack Hughes, the
Cale Makars.
Adam Fox, even he's doing really well in New York.
The
Kaprizov's definitely going to be a top player for years. I wouldn't say Boldy quite yet. He's on a solid track, but. I wouldn't call him a complete superstar. I would definitely say Kaprizov's a superstar up at this point. He's top 10 in scoring.
I think Boldy has the potential.
Absolutely.
Just because he's playing so well at 20 years old now, he's just going to get stronger, more mature. And if he's playing with the players that we have, I think he's going to be a great player.
Yeah. And I think the key to the Wild's success is definitely, our special teams when it comes to our power play and our penalty kill. Now, our penalty kill was absolutely fantastic on Monday. And it was pretty solid against Boston, too. And there was definitely a change in philosophy. We're definitely a lot more aggressive on the penalty kill. And really, I mean, because we were definitely a lot more passive, and teams were able to just find weak side guy and get passes across. They wanted to do whatever the hell they wanted. They were able to do it.
Yep.
And so...
adding Delorier and Jost to that PK... It's just a whole different team. I mean, love Sturm. He was great on the penalty kill, but just adding different players to that penalty kill can just make a world of difference.
Yep. And then we look at the power play, where our power play has definitely struggled. And the way our power play is set up, so we're still running just our normal forward lines, the Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello line.
With the 2D pairing.
With 2D pairing, and then Fiala, Goudreau, and Boldy with 2D pairing. So it's definitely not a traditional where you have maybe a fourth forward sitting at the point, which we've done before this season. We've had Goudreau up at the top. We've had Zuccarello at the top. I think that the power play definitely still needs some work with it. But we've got it. We've got enough guys, enough skilled guys to where we can move people around.
Yep.
We can make something work. And once we find that thing that just clicks, and really what it comes down to, I believe we need to put more shots in the goal. These little passes to each other, we're kind of missing them. We're not really getting tape to tape.
We're getting a little too fancy. We need to just simplify it and just play normal hockey. And I'd really like to see, not just having our 2D pairings on the power play, I'd like to see us kind of flip Jost in there.
Absolutely.
Just because he's the new guy, he has the potential to be a good hockey player, and why not try him on the second power play?
And he never really had the chance to play meaningful minutes in Colorado, especially when they had such a deep roster. But he was.
They have Rantanen, they have McKinnon, they have Landeskog, they have Kadri,
and he really was a very highly touted player out of North Dakota, and he was a former 10th overall pick. So he's got the offensive upside. He just hasn't had the chance to show it at an NHL level.
Yep.
And so at this point, I'm thinking, why not throw him up on the power play? Doesn't have to be first-line power play, but give him some power play minutes. Have him move around with the puck a bit.
I could love to see that Goudreau, Boldy, Fiala, Jost, and Brody as power play as the second power play would be nice.
And then have on the first...
Hartman, Zuccarello, Kaprizov, and
Spurgeon.
That would be a solid top 2 power plays.
And then the reason why I want to leave Dumba out of there is because Dumba, I feel like he thinks he's Alex Ovechkin because he likes to sit at the top of the circle, wait for a one-timer. Problem is, he's not Ovechkin, so he's missing the net constantly. He cannot hit the net. I mean, sure, he hit the net on Monday against Vegas, which, I mean, was a hell of a shot. Give him props for that. But you really, when you're sitting there, he's not moving around with the puck too much. He's sitting there waiting for the one-timer. Puck goes all the way around. We don't get the puck back and we're losing zone time. And at the same time, he's not able to really cover the line as well when he's just sitting there for a one-timer.
He's not the fastest player, and he's really been known for his offensive abilities. And honestly, these last 2 seasons, he really just hasn't shown it. And I think this summer, we just need to trade him when his value's high.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it would unload, I believe, $6 or $7 million off the cap hit as well, which would definitely help us retain some players.
Yep.
And then everything we thought, basically the way we thought this offseason was going to go last week is completely different now after the trade deadline. And that's out of Russo's words.
Yep.
Because now we have new guys in, and who knows how well they do. I mean, for all we know, Middleton, Fleury, and maybe even Delurier could all be a bust, and we just let them go, and we trade Dumber or whatever, and maybe we sign Fleury, or not
Yep.
Fleury, or Fiala.
Yep.
But it all comes down to just how well these new guys do and what Bill Guerin sees best fit for this team moving forward, because this offseason and the next, $15 million in dead cap. That is unheard of when it comes to the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously and he knew that going into buying out the Parisian Suter contracts, but it was necessary moves in terms of just changing the culture, changing the identity of this team, and really putting us into the next level.
Yep.
Instead of just being your mediocre Minnesota Mild. And now this team and we've said it before, this team is exciting to watch. And I believe they're going to continue to be exciting to watch, especially with new guys coming up through the ranks as well.
Yep.
Alright, I think that completes our episode for this week, so hopefully we can get this up to y'all pretty soon here. I'm still working on trying to get our podcast up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Just bear with me on it. But until next time, we will see y'all in a few weeks.
Go Wild.